Welcome, everybody, to our first video. I'm Zach Joyner, your friendly neighborhood host of the Spideydude Experience. This is our brand new podcast that is powered by Spidey-dude.com and the Spideydude Radio Network. This is the inaugural episode of our brand new flagship show, the Spideydude Experience. This is obviously our first episode. I am Zach Joyner, your friendly neighborhood webmaster and host of the program. If this is your first time listening to anything on the Spideydude Radio Network, welcome. I am so excited to be bringing this episode to you and this inaugural show. If you're listening to us either on our Facebook page or our YouTube page, we'll have posted it on those various places. Obviously, we'll have it on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts as well. But I don't do this show alone. I am not a one-man band. This is not my only. I'm not just a single guy doing this. I have a whole team, and I am so proud to bring forth these guys tonight. We'll talk about all the people that are going to be a part of this. We'll have a rotating cast of characters and people that will be a part of it, and so we're really, really looking forward to bringing this to you. So, without further ado, let me kind of expand the video. If you're looking at us right now on the YouTube page, so I'm going to start. Everybody's going to go around the horn and kind of give their superhero origin story, how they got into Spider-Man, and we're going to start with Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've done some other podcasts before, I know.
Yes.
But this is your first time doing a Spidey-related podcast.
Specifically, yeah, a Spidey show, if you will. So I can talk forever, so I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible. I grew up basically loving Spider-Man and Marvel. I was born in the early 80s, so I grew up on Secret Wars and Secret Wars action figures. And my earliest memory, I can tell you, is playing with my Dr. Octopus Secret Wars action figure and like Star Wars action figures. Those are my earliest memories. So Star Wars, which if you're hearing me, you might know I might be on a Star Wars podcast. If you don't, I'm a big Star Wars fan. But basically, keep it to Marvel. Spider-Man, my parents would buy us Secret Wars comics because of the toys we had and the cartoons and everything. So I have an older brother. He's 6 years older than I am. He would buy all these comic books, and I just would always gravitate towards Spider-Man and Marvel comics. And I kept on forever, or for a long time. And then got out of comics after the Clone Saga, just because I got older, got really into playing punk rock music, and just got too much going on to keep buying comic books. And they got really bad in the late 90s. So I said, no, this is a good time to jump off. So I jumped off, came back when the movie started coming out with the original Amazing Spider-Man 2, started buying graphic novels again. And that's right when JMS was in like kind of towards the end of his run with the other, or he was kind of about to jump off. And I just jumped back on to comic books right when that was actually my jumping back on point was the other. Because it was like, oh, this great new moment for me to jump in and then go back into comic books. And then ever since then, I've been collecting Spider-Man nonstop, reading it nonstop. Like I said, a huge Spider-Man fan. I love him. I have a lot of opinions about him. So I'm probably going to disagree with a lot of you probably on a lot of different things, which is fine. And I'm ready to debate and discuss for the love of my character. So, but I'm very honored and happy to be here, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for you kind of reached out to me.
Yeah,
I'll kind of get into that in a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Next up, I'm going to introduce Neil Bogenrieder, fellow Texan. Neil, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm going to blow you up so you can have the floor.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm big.
Yeah, you're
okay. I'm a big boy now. Okay.
You're a big boy now.
Hi, I'm you monster.
You're a monster.
Okay, so hi, I'm Neil. It's kind of hard to describe my comics journey. So I was born in 1998, which was right around the start of the Mackie Byrne reboot, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, the Mackie Byrne reboot started in late '98, early '99.
Yeah, so I think I was born like right as Mackie Byrne was starting.
You weren't missing much.
I was not. I went back and reread it for posterity's sake. I did not miss much, as it turns out.
I'm sorry.
My first ever issue, and I got into comics by complete accident. My first comic book ever was Amazing Spider-Man number 505, which is Vibes by Straczynski and I think Romita Jr.
Yep.
It was a good, feel-good issue, and from there, I did not get another issue until I think the first issue of the Civil War tie-ins, and from there,
Ron Garney and Straczynski.
Yeah, I picked up Spider-Girl as my next one. I did not pick up another Spider-Man comic until I think Big Time.
Oh, okay.
And I think I didn't really have much of a presence in the Marvel Universe outside of Spider-Man until I believe mid 2015, which was when I was, in my sophomore year of high school. And I started, getting my toes wet in other branches of comic books, and that included, not just Marvel but other publishers. And as my taste expanded, as did my love of freeform jazz.
What?
That is something that I actually grew to love during college. Freeform jazz.
Well, I grew up going to New Orleans, so like I understand.
No, you and I are gonna take a road trip to New Orleans during Mardi Gras.
Oh God, not during. Look, people are like, let's go during Mardi Gras. I am the type.
It's a nightmare.
I've gone on Friday and Saturday nights on Bourbon Street. I don't no, like that's
even
then
enough. It's packed.
Yeah, it's enough. Like that's enough people. Trust me. Like,
but
everybody talks about going to Mardi Gras until they actually go to Mardi Gras,
and then they realize what an absolute.
And then they're like, oh.
Nutcase it is. Yeah. But anyways, as I was going into college, well, this is actually before I got into college. I've been reviewing ASM semi-professional. I wouldn't say professionally because it's not an actual job, but as a fan, I've been reviewing ASM critically for the past almost 5 years. So I spent the majority of my time as like a dedicated fan who actually thinks critically.
Yeah. Reviewing
comics in writing, and sometimes I do it in audio format, sometimes I do it in video format. Wow, I'm so tech savvy. I am known as tech support man.
Oh, you can go online and Google Neil, and you'll find his ASM reviews. They're always very good, and they're always pretty current. So if you can go back and look at the catalog. He's been a very big stalwart reviewer on another site. And
I like to think that, in spite of like my dislike of past runs, I like to think I can be fair.
Yeah.
Like I don't heap on disdain for the sake of being disdainful. I like to think that there's an element of justification to whatever I say about something, and I think that's the core of what any comic reviewer should do.
I agree. And I'm excited to have you on, Neil. I know you're excited to be able to talk about the Spencer run, and we'll kind of get into that in a little bit.
In a bit more detail than I think writing can put, and a bit more than I can put into words and written.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Adam. Adam, you are if you've been on Spideydude.com and you saw the article, he actually did our coverage for San Diego Comic-Con. He hails from the great city of San Diego, and so you're tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you start reading comics, and what you do, and go from there.
Well, let's see. I think my first. I think I was introduced to the character probably through the '90s cartoon show, which I have a great amount of fondness for. I think my first issue was ASM 423. It was an
Yeah,
Electro
yeah.
issue written by Tom DeFalco.
I can't rember if that was
And then
if that was
I don't
Steve
know how-
Scaros and or Joe Bennett.
It's I've got it up.
Yeah.
It's
That
Joe
was during
Bennett.
that weird
Yeah.
time
Where
where Steve Scaros was supposed
Yeah.
to be the artist for Amazing Spider-Man, and then Joe Bennett basically kind of came in to fill in because like he had other priorities, i.e., storyboarding the first Matrix movie, and so once he got that gig, it's like, oh, that pays me so much better than comics, so I'm going to go do that now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, who
right.
wouldn't
I
wanna
mean,
do
the amount
that?
of royalties he probably has gotten since then is astounding. But yeah, pretty much, I think technically Steve Scaros's run ends with the 3-part Return of Doc Ock saga, which I think was I think ended in either 428 or 429, if I remember. And I'm pulling that completely out of my ass. So feel free to let me know if I'm right or wrong later.
Sure, yeah.
If you're listening to this on the audio version, I probably will insert something to verify. But yeah.
And then I don't remember how I got this issue, but then I got the next one, which was he lifts like the big subway car or something, and then I got the
that was you talk about this where they were in the elevator. It was Norman and Peter in the elevator.
No, not that one. Although I did, that came later, but
right.
Anyway, it was still Tom DeFalco and Joe Bennett in ASM, but
that was the next that was where he it was Elektra showed up for reasons, and he was about to. That was like the random issue right before. I think that was the next issue. Actually, I don't know. That was
yeah.
And now that I'm remembering, but yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to step all over you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And then I got the flashback issue, the ASM flashback issue. So it's like somehow I got 3. And then it was a little while after that. I guess it was a year later. Because I'm looking at the cover dates now. I had a subscription to Peter Parker Spider-Man that started with the Identity Crisis tie-in. So he's got the Dusk suit and all that.
Yeah, John Romita Jr., Howard Mackie written Peter Parker Spider-Man.
And I had that I guess I had that for about a year, and then I would go to the 7-Eleven down the street, and I'd pick up ASM when some ASMs when the reboot had just started and all that. And
I'm so sorry. So there's a lot of reboot talking, and I did not expect when we were starting to record this particular episode. But go on.
Yeah, and I would pick up some of those web spinners issues a couple of those ones in the first arc, and then I picked up some Spider-Girl stuff, and I kind of I sort of fell off the wagon, I guess, but the Raimi movies came out, and I love those a lot. I think they're great films still. Even the third one has good stuff in it, I think, and then so we're getting to high school, and I'm I just get out of comics for some reason, I guess just because of life and school. I think that happens with everybody at some point. And then for some reason, I don't think I've read a Spider-Man comic in for a long time. And then for some reason I started reading, I started getting back sort of into it, and I started reading during Superior, I guess because it's okay, this is happening, and I guess I'll read it. And I was well, that was something, I guess. And then I've been kind of following it ever since. And one important thing I want to say is that I'm a pretty big Steve Ditko fan, and I gotta shout out that issue that's it was ASM Volume 2, number 20 or something, with all those reprints. Those Spider Slayer reprints.
Oh yeah. That was
When I saw that Ditko one, I was obsessed with that. I was holy, redacted. This is awesome, and that made me get I went to the bookstore and I got like the second volume of the Essentials. It's over here somewhere, but I won't dig it out. And I got the first one too later on, and I don't know. It's just
those Essentials. Even though they're black and white, those Essentials right now, if you try to buy those on Amazon, they're not cheap at all. No, so if you happen to pick those up when they were being printed, they were
only like $20.
Oh yeah, I mean, now granted, obviously Marvel Unlimited is the subscription service that you can pay $10 a month or $60 a year, and I will tell you, if you have the opportunity to do that, do it, because it is worth the price, because it has every single issue of Amazing Spider-Man. It does not have every single issue of the satellite titles, but it has every single issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And if you want to get to know the character, that is definitely a great way of doing it, without having to shell out the money for the Masterworks or the omnibuses, because those aren't cheap. Those are great. Right. Don't misunderstand, but they're not cheap at all. So. Yeah, so Adam's going to help us out on various things on the site. So I'm really, really excited to have you on board, Adam.
I do want to say that if Neil is tech support man, then I'm trivia man, because I'm kind of like a Spidey thesaurus and or dictionary, at least like an appendix, but like with maybe pages torn out. So like I kind of have like some of this stuff I've committed to memory for some reason. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'll probably be like correcting or like adding to people's thoughts, like, oh, when did this happen? Well, it happened here, or something like that. So
I look forward, like, we're eventually going to have like a trivia thing down the road. We'll talk a little bit more about like the future of the show towards the end, but Adam, I'm really excited to have you on board, but I do want to introduce our next panelist.
Happy to be here.
And I say panelists because technically there's two of them. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing what they got to say. Hailing from the great city of Boston, or just outside of it, I guess, is Brian. Brian, and you have somebody with you, right?
I do. Can you say hi?
Hi.
So Brian and Billy.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just probably a big lag, unfortunately. But yeah, man, we got Billy and Brian. You guys are from Boston. I'm going to blow you guys up for a second so everybody can see you. So Brian, you and I have talked for a long time. You're a big fan of like the 70s stuff, right?
Oh, I absolutely am. That's an understatement. Pretty much, first of all, I love all Spidey. That's an understatement. Do you want me to tell some about myself, or?
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself and like when you started collecting and stuff like that.
Is there lag?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I was born June 12th. I'm a Gemini. I like walks on the beach. This isn't for my online dating profile, is it?
No. I mean, you can put it on the online dating profile, but that might scare more girls away than attract them. I'm not saying that females don't listen to the show, or males. It depends on what you're. But I would just recommend.
Is that what I'm doing wrong?
That's probably, I would say.
All right. So how I got into comic books. I have to get a little bit deep for this.
Sure.
I was born with a form of cerebral palsy named hypotonia. I wasn't supposed to walk or talk. Doctors, specialists said, he can't do that. He's going to be in a wheelchair. My mom fought to get me services. I wasn't able to walk or talk until I was 4. So I related to the Incredible Hulk, the old TV show, with Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno, Jack Colvin. And that translated to the old Spider-Man TV show with Nicholas Hammond, Fred Waugh, who spent most of the time in the suit. And I can't tell you what my first comic book was. It was like when I was 2.5, 3. I'm lucky if I remember what I did 10 minutes ago. But yeah, just equal from there. Comics have always been my escapism from the world. That safety blanket of sorts. That's it.
So, Billy, is this all your dad's fault that you got into comics?
Yeah.
Well, Billy, tell us.
He used to put on the Spectacular Spidey.
Oh man, my man, that is a very favorite show of the Spideydude Network. Spectacular Spidey is a show that I hold very near and dear to my heart.
My dad used to play the Spectacular Spider-Man theme song while I was potty training.
That's awesome. Oh man, that's awesome. So, did you get into comics that way, and with after watching
Hey, it worked.
Spidey? Hey, dude, whatever it takes, man. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I got into comic books from the movies like Amazing Spider-Man 1 and also from my dad. And then Superhero Squad and tons of other stuff. That's how I got into most superhero stuff, but I really like Spider-Man just because I like him because even though he gets beaten up so badly or he gets messed up so badly, he still fights. And that's what helps, and that's what keeps on reminding me that I can still be a superhero one day if I can still fight.
Well, Billy, your perspective is one that I very much value, because every person in this room right now was you at one point or another, and I really appreciate you being a part of this particular inaugural episode, because we are trying to reach not just us 30-somethings or 20-somethings or teens. We want to reach the kids like you, and so that's part of what this show is all about. And I am so happy and look forward to hearing your review of the books we're going to talk about tonight. And so I'm going to kind of give my story, if that's okay. All right.
Okay.
So all right. So I muted myself. Sorry about that. All right, so here we are. I am, like I mentioned, I'm Zach Joyner. My first issue of Spider-Man. I'm running under the assumption that there's people that are both, existing listeners of our shows, but also people that have never, even heard of Spideydude Radio Network. So I started on comics with the Clone Saga. My first issue I got at a supermarket in 1996. It was Spectacular Spider-Man 223. It was the spec issue that came out right after ASM 400. So that explains my hatred for Aunt May. And so yeah, I started reading Spider-Man during the Clone Saga. Tom DeFalco, Sal Buscema. Unfortunately, it was Bill Sienkiewicz doing the finishes on that issue, but I didn't know that at the time, that it was not nearly as good as it normally was with Sal Buscema. But I started with that particular story. I did an entire show devoted to it called Clone Saga Chronicles here on Spideydude.com. In 1998, my dad decided to create me a webpage, and I asked the simple question, could other people see it? And so after that, he helped find a free domain a free web service called Zoom, XOOM.com. And we were a member of that particular page until 2001, when we bought the Spideydude.com domain, and then I lost it in 2010, but we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, now I'm Spidey-dude.com. Basically, if you look up Spidey-dude on Google, we're going to be the first thing that pops up. Started podcasting in 2006 and did a show for Brad Douglas's Spider-Man Crawl Space for a little bit. And then I ventured off on my own, started Crawling Saga Chronicles in 2009. And then I helped launch our two other shows, Mayday Mondays and Spectacular Radio. Mayday Mondays covers Spider-Girl and the MC2 as a whole. And then we also on Spectacular Radio, we have Greg Bashansky. Him and I launched Mayday Mondays with Gerard Delatour. Greg Bashansky and I launched Spectacular Radio. We cover every single episode of Spec Radio. We cover it from the fans' perspective. But we also have interviews with the supervising producer of the show, named Greg Wiseman. That's a name you might be familiar with if you're familiar with the show Gargoyles or maybe Young Justice. So we interview him, and then somebody that's related to that particular episode, like Darren Norris or the actual voice of Spidey, Josh Keaton, or people that work behind the scenes like Victor Cook or Jennifer L. Anderson. So we are, at the time of this recording, we're about 4 episodes left of the show. And so really, really excited to have this new flagship program on the Spideydude Radio Network. The mission of this, I've kind of gotten into it, but I want to kind of make this kind of abundantly clear to everybody. And as my iPad's not cooperating. So, I want to create a positive atmosphere. This show is all about Spidey. It's about Spider-Man. It's about Spider-Man and his strengths and weaknesses, and talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the character, strengths and weaknesses of the writing, strengths and weaknesses of the art. We're going to be critical, but we're never going to be personal. We're never going to get personal about how we approach Spidey. We're going to talk about the love of Spider-Man and his multiverse and how it binds us together. Because not everybody's going to have same experiences, as already been told by how everybody started in comics. I mean, Paul started in the 80s. I started in the 90s. Neil and Adam started in the 2000s. And same thing with Billy. And, you got Brian, who really started in the 70s. And Brian, I don't know if you know this, but my sister had cerebral palsy. And my twin sister did. And so I have a very soft spot for people that have, like you, that have fought and overcame the challenges of CP. And so, but this show may be very different from a year from now. So I mentioned, Gerard Delatour and Greg Bashansky, and they're going to be especially Greg. He'll be on. He's right now. He would have been on tonight, but he had a hurricane hit New York State instead of Florida, and he just now got power back. So they've been hit pretty hard, but they just now got power back and internet back. I think today. So unfortunately, he couldn't be here. Kelly McDaniel is also going to be a part of our network. She's going to be launching a new show. I don't want to say what yet, because we'll save that for later, but definitely really, really excited about that particular show. And then my girlfriend, Sarah, is also going to be part of the network as well. So looking forward to everybody doing their various shows and everything, doing various things for the site. And this is very much a new beginning for me. I was a part of Crawl Space for 17 years, and earlier this year I decided to leave and venture out on my own. So very, very much thankful for my time there, but very, very, very ready to be moving forward. The big thing that we're going to be covering tonight is a 5-issue arc called Back to Basics, and we're also going to be covering the Free Comic Book Day 2018 that came out. We're gonna be kind of going through. Everybody's been kind of be given their rundown. We're gonna kind of break it down issue by issue, and kind of give our thoughts. I'll go around the horn and give everybody a chance to kind of talk about what they liked and didn't like, and give an overall grade. So without further ado, let's do it, boys and girls. I got my recap right here. And if you're watching us on either Facebook or YouTube, you'll be seeing me kind of you maybe see me looking up, and I'm directing traffic, so to speak. Oh, come on! All right. So Paul, I'm going to apologize in advance because I may take a couple of shots at slots. So I read the entire slot run. Frontwards to backwards, and there was things I liked about it, truth be told. Oh yeah, Paul, you may have to unmute.
I'm unmuted now. I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So after 10 years of Dan Slott writing Spider-Man, we finally get a brand new voice, a different voice for Spider-Man for the first time really since 2007. Nick Spencer was the writer of the well-received book, The Superior Foes of Spider-Man, during our detour in publishing history of Amazing Spider-Man, where we had the Superior Spider-Man, who wasn't as superior as we thought, if you read the story. Ryan Ottley was the longtime artist of Invincible, a book that was one of the best titles from Image Comics, the largest independent publisher of comic books. And so together they would start to shepherd a new era of Spider-Man that was teased in very much the same way that Slott and the Webheads and the Brain Trust were back in 2007, which was the Free Comic Book Day. Now, Free Comic Book Day is an event that's been going on for the last several years. It's always the first weekend in May. Now, 2020 was the exception because let's face it, 2020's been a weird year in general. So Free Comic Book Day was supposed to happen this last May, but we just a few weeks ago actually got the Free Comic Book Day issue, which is actually really good. If you haven't, we'll be reviewing that in a future episode. So May 5th, 2018, it brought us the glimpse of things to come as Dan Slott was winding down his run. Dan Slott winded his run down with 801. So I'm going to be using legacy numbering. I hope everybody's okay with that. It's just, to me, I wish that we didn't have all these reboots and resets and all that thing. Just give me 800. Give me the big numbers. I'm the exact opposite of Marvel, I guess, in their marketing department. But it would be Volume 5, Number 1, also known as 802. So, but first, we're going to get the 10-page story, which whets the appetites of those who were possibly looking to get into Spider-Man again, if they had fallen off the wagon, or if they were like me and started collecting during a controversial time in Spider-Man's life. They keep reading because they have a problem, like me. I have a problem. Our story begins with a retelling in a single panel of how he started off as Spider-Man. Bite, then Ben gets shot, and bang, he's Spider-Man. I encourage you to go back and read Amazing Fantasy 15. He also punches Doc Ock in the face, which, if you've read Superior, you might have wanted to do that too. Peter Parker is literally going back to basics. He's living with Randy Robinson again, which was the only enjoyable thing that came from the era known as the reboot. Yes, kids, that was a dark time indeed. They are apartment hunting by actually looking for an apartment instead of using the internet, or meet with a scummy landlord who basically is like, "Oh, you get a view of the dumpster." After complaining about rent control in Marvel 616, the duo are just walking around the city when they suddenly are put into a bad situation. That's right, it's Boomerang She-Electro, aka Electro. I just call her She-Electro because Max Dillon's Electro, and we can't call her Electra because, well, yeah. The Rhino and the Big Wheel. Yes, kids, the Big Wheel was a lame villain that was from the 1970s who ran over things, literally. And he also rides a giant wheel. So it's a deep cut, as Peter notes in his inner monologue. And so it's kind of like that big space wheel, actually, from Avengers Endgame. If you watched Avengers Endgame, you remember the space wheel where Peter Parker's spider sense kind of, goes off for the first time in the MCU. Yeah. Anybody?
Wait, I have a question. Isn't the Big Wheel also responsible for Rocket Racer, or am I thinking the Prowler? Am I getting those two mixed up?
Well, they were two separate characters, but they ended up Prowler and Rocket Racer ended up teaming up with the Outlaws, and then during the 90s, they actually
Well, no, but originally Big Wheel was a part, like he was tied to the Prowler or something like that back in the early issues. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I think so. Adam, do you remember offhand? I'll unmute you.
I think that Big Wheel came, from what I remember, I think he came up like shortly after Rocket Racer was introduced. I don't know if they have anything to do with the Prowler, because I think because Rocket Racer, if I'm remembering correctly, I think he's kind of a bit of a, tech guy,
Right.
mechanic. Like he kind of did all himself, like how, but also Prowler did that with his own stuff. So we got two kind of
right. But didn't one of them work for Big
same.
Wheel, and then that's how Spider-Man got involved with them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll
so
look that up.
Okay. So
Sure.
according to the fictional character biography from that great site called Wikipedia,
Yes.
Jackson
Base citation.
Yeah. Jackson Will. Yeah, that was he embezzled from his own company. Fearing that he might be caught, he hires a youthful criminal, Rocket Racer, to steal the evidence that incriminates him. So yes, you were correct. Rocket Racer was involved. He was supposed to steal the evidence. So yes, and then Rocket Racer and Prowler ended up being a part of a team called the Outlaws that was by Silver Sable from the Web of Spider-Man run in the 90s.
Jerry Conway, right? Did he write that?
Yeah, I think Conway. That was when Conway was writing both Spectacular and Web of Spider-Man at the same time.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think it was during
well,
that.
actually,
I think it was.
What happened was Rocket Racer and Prowler were fighting in the Great Game from the Clone Saga, and Rocket Racer got almost or either Rocket Racer or Prowler, one or the other, almost got paralyzed. In fact, it was Prowler, and so Prowler actually this was during the set up during the Amazing Spider-Man run with Tom DeFalco, and then Todd DeZago picked it up as a subplot with Prowler. There was a 3-issue arc in a show, and we'll talk about that more in a future show on the Spideydude Radio Network. How's that for a tease? Bang! All right.
Ooh, cliffhanger. Woo.
All right. So Boomerang stole something from the Natural History Museum because that's what Boomerang does. And Peter uses the excuse that he needs to take pictures for the Bugle, but he's not a photographer anymore. But it still works because, she Electro shoots electricity from her fingers, and science demands it. Spidey separates the group having Rhino use his head to smash into a car, and Boomerang, well, he got smashed into Rhino too. With Electro, she tried to attempt to fry Spidey, but instead fried the Big Wheel and overloaded him. Peter then webs away and saves the day. Kingpin returns, and we get an aside that Kingpin was stolen by Daredevil, which made me laugh out loud. So Kingpin thinks he's gotten the prize, but psych! Boomerang escapes. Peter then meets with Randy, and they find a 3-bedroom, not a 2-bedroom apartment. The third roommate? Oh, yes. It's none other than Fred himself. Boomerang! That's right. And that's how the Free Comic Book Day issue ends, with Fred introducing himself to Peter Parker. I'm gonna kind of talk about both of these, both this and issue 1 together, because I kind of feel like they fit together. Because really, you get an aside in issue 1 about what happened in this, but I just kind of feel like they flex together really well. So I'm going to do my recap of issue 1, then I'll kind of give my thoughts about what I liked and stuff. So our issue opens with a dream sequence of issue 1. Issue 801 is the issue that we're going to be covering now, or 802. Sorry, 802. Oof. Our issue opens with a dream sequence that directly references the sensational annual that was published in 2006 before Brand New Day. So if you haven't picked that up, I definitely encourage you to look that and find that's a really, really great MJ Spidey story. Peter's awoken by his roommate, Fred, playing Call of Duty Latveria. Peter has a big appointment at ESU, but first, we get a double-page splash of the Avengers, X-Men, Guardians of the Galaxy, and the FF fighting an alien invasion. But of course, Peter shows up, and then everybody's pissed off. What? Why? It's because Fisk is trying to make Peter Parker the hero of New York. And kind of like Spider-Man 2 by Raimi if it was done in the 616. So Fisk has his own motives, but we'll learn about that a little bit later. We cut back to Daredevil, who stupidly still doesn't know who Peter Parker is. And yes, I am a little bitter. Johnny and Peter banter, but then we must smash cut back to ESU, where Peter is finally outed as a plagiarist. Sorry, Paul.
Hey, I've got there. How much time you got? We can talk about this for a long time.
This is one of my big pros of the issue, actually.
Exactly.
Right. This is okay. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is basically due to Otto getting a degree in Peter's name when he was in Peter's body.
Brilliant.
He's been
brilliant.
Yes. He has been fired subsequently as the science editor, while Robbie acts like it's 1997 again, thinking that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And then we also then cut to MJ's reaction, which literally is, well, should be the reaction if you're Peter Parker's friend and know he's Spider-Man, which is laughter. She literally laughs in his face because only Peter really could have this bad of luck. Peter thinks that something's missing. So, like, Peter's like, oh, crap, Aunt May's going to find out. So she then comically tries to go get, like, the newspaper, turn off the TV. But Aunt May is hip with the kids. And so she gets Google alerts, just like other people do if they had their nephew as, a science editor of the Daily Bugle. So, obviously, he's very unsuccessful. She kind of gives him a little bit of a talking to, like, I'm really, really disappointed in you that you just didn't take responsibility for this. Because, frankly, she should know he's Spider-Man. Anyway, more on that later. Peter contemplates his death at a certain point, thinking that, oh, man, I need to go take care of this alien invasion. I'm going to sacrifice myself. I'm going to be the hero. And he makes one of the worst, like, really bad jokes on the way out. And he's like, please don't let this be my last joke. Where he literally says, bye, Felicia, the black cat.
I thought it was amazing.
It was a power move.
It really was. It's one of those that's
It's
very, very much the, kind of it's funny, but it's also like kind of
very
bad
dry humor.
Very dry humor.
But that's Spider-Man, though, to me. Like, that's
sure.
He's gonna, like, say things that are current and make fun of them and date himself because it's obvious that's just who he is. That's always been Spider-Man.
I agree. There's a certain element. I like when Spidey makes good jokes, but like when he's like the butt of the joke, I have a bit of a problem.
He's not, but I wouldn't say that's the butt of the joke, though.
Like he's not even a even in like one of the later panels, which is more of a physical gag. It's not really at his expense. It's more just like grand take me Jesus, come to Jesus moment, and then just rudely interrupted by a literal wall.
Right.
That was funny though.
Yeah, like
it's great.
He's like going towards the light, right? And he's thinking, I'm going towards the light, and then he splats right on the wall because he realizes, oh wait, this is all an illusion. And we get to our big villain of the issue, which is Mysterio,
my boy.
Yeah. So he hits the fake bubble spaceship and knocks out Mysterio. So next page, we get a 6-page splash that if you just read this page, it is inherently, it's inherently meta, in my opinion. It's almost like a meta commentary. And we get, these 6 pages. And if you're reading this like in the digital version, which I did, it's very cinematic because it's like just, who is he talking to? Black background, Peter, close up, and Peter's in his Spider-Man costume. And we then see who he's speaking to, which is it's Mary Jane. And they're in this together, as they always should have been. And I add should because clearly we're going to be talking a lot about the controversies that led up to this. But we then kind of go to the second story, where we kind of open with the brief overview of Mysterio's life before we get to a big splash page where he's like, I'm Mysterio.
That's a great drawing, by the way, too. And I'm not the biggest fan of that guy either.
Yeah, Humberto Ramos is one of those artists that is
It's hit and miss for me.
very hit and miss for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And he nailed that Mysterio
He did.
Yeah.
reveal.
I love the outline of the
Yeah,
guy's
yeah,
face. It's
his-
great.
His
Yeah.
panel composition is incredible.
Oh,
Yes.
you know, Humberto Ramos is one of those when you have Humberto Ramos that has time and isn't deadline. I call it deadline Ramos, where it's rushed and you can tell it's rushed and it's very loose with his pencils. When he
Sure.
has time and he has tight pencils, it's just he can be really really good, and then he can be not good.
Also ties to Olazaba as his inker.
Right.
Inks go a very long way in impacting how a artist's final work turns out.
So he's in court attempting to represent himself despite the judge's insistence not to. But then in walks Janice Lincoln. And Janice is going to be his representative. But wait, she starts vomiting like cockroaches and centipedes and millipedes.
When I first read this issue back in the day, I kind of did not know what was going on. It blew my mind.
It kind of spooked me. Like,
Yeah,
unironically.
exactly. Yeah.
It very much has the intended effect. Like it's very, very,
It's jarring.
yeah. If you're not, and the way it's written, it's very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a, I'll out of nowhere, and I'll go into my overall thoughts. Like it's like a sequence out of a horror film,
Mm-hmm.
and we're introduced to a character with like centipedes and bandages and a trench coat and like kind of like a almost like a hood.
Kabuki mask, kind of.
Yeah, and you just see nothing but teeth, and he's just like this.
Is it Kabuki Man?
Yeah, like Ramos drawing horror is like
Kino.
Like perfection. So basically, this big bad, this villain is like, I dragged you from the depths of hell once. I'm not afraid to take you back there again. But he even grabs grabs Janice is like, I even gave you a nice lawyer. Look how you treated her. And so like Mysterio is freaking out. And turns out he's in fact on the stand. And so like,
Which was hilarious, by the way.
yeah, like he's like, oh, and it's like, boom, we're back to reality. We go from a horror movie to reality, and
the Beetle, you're great acting.
Yeah.
It's good.
Phenomenal.
Even within like the snap back to reality, there's still some genuinely good comedic timing.
Yeah,
well,
right.
like
Suspense.
Janet,
Yeah.
like Mysterio goes and sits down, and Janice is like, that's the best acting I've ever seen. And he's like, but that wasn't acting, and so. That's kind of our tease for the big bad villain of the Spencer run. And so we then cut back to Empire State University, where the dean of admissions is kind of talking to Peter about the fact that he plagiarized, but he was given a second chance. That's right. He was given a second chance. Somebody vouched for him. Who could it be? And then we have our last splash page of the issue. The Lizard. That's right. The Lizard is like, Peter Parker, have a seat.
Oh no, Dr. Connor's class. I almost forgot.
Yeah. And so that's how issue 1 ends. The courtroom sequence, the sequence with Mysterio was drawn by Humberto Ramos, but the rest of it was drawn by Ryan Ottley. And Ryan Ottley also drew the first chapter, I would call it, with the free comic book day issue. And so I kind of want to give my thoughts. I'll go around the horn. I'll give my thoughts first, and then we'll kind of go down. One minor programming note. We lost Brian and Billy for a minute, so we'll come back to them as soon as they can, as soon as their router reboots and technical problems. It's the internet.
Chat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna say this. This was as somebody that like was very ambivalent towards the end of the Slott run. There was elements. Slott was very up and down for me. Again, I started podcasting around the end of the JMS run, and then Brand New Day hit, and One More Day, of course, hit. it's been this kind of this scepter that's been looming. And so Mary Jane and Peter Parker have been kept apart for reasons, literally for reasons. And so for me, this issue was very good in the sense of, in one issue, some of the things that I had problems from the so-called previous administration of Spider-Man are immediately addressed. And we kind of talked about it a little bit. The plagiarism thing was something that just lingered. Peter Parker got to be able to experience all the spoils of it. With Volume 3, with the Parker Industries stuff, and ultimately that collapsed. But then we're like, Volume 4 hits, and we're like, oh wait, like Peter Parker is an international man of mystery. He's, got his company's worth billions of dollars. He has a brand new Apple Watch knockoff called Webware. He's like this billionaire playboy philanthropist, and it's like Peter Parker meets Tony Stark. And it just didn't feel right for a lot of people, and myself included. And I know there might be fans of it. And Paul, you might be a fan of that era. I don't know. We didn't talk about that before we started, but
I'll do that in a second.
But the thing is that I appreciate Paul. That's why I'm glad Paul's here, because we're compare and contrast. So coming into this, I was a big fan of Spencer's Superior Foes of Spider-Man. Now, I will say this: if you go back and into the Internet Archives and you find me review the first issue of Superior Foes, I didn't get it at first. I didn't get that it was supposed to be a humor comic. I didn't understand that. I kind of looked at it real serious, and they're like, dude, it's a humor comic. I was like, oh, it's supposed to be funny. I'm supposed to laugh. Like
r/whoosh.
Well, yeah. It's one of those things where everything was so serious when it came to Spider-Man and Spider-Man's world and Ultimate Spider-Man. Didn't matter what Spider-Man was. It's all super serious, grim, dark kind of type thing. And to come in with Superior Foes, it was like, oh, okay, we're gonna kind of play theater of the absurd. I'd not heard of Nick Spencer. I've actually seen Nick Spencer in person. He was at I was at San Diego Comic-Con in 2011. He was there, and Steve Wacker was there, and Dan Slott videoed it in. Literally, they showed a video of Dan Slott.
Phoning it, I guess you could say.
No, he phoned it in the following year.
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
they had him on the phone the following year.
Right,
but he was there in 2010 when they made the announcement that he was going to be taking over as sole writer. And to Slott's credit, like the big time era of Spider-Man, I was very interested in, because I was very, very tired of the webhead / brain trust, just because it was so inconsistent from month to month. Because there were so many different cooks in the kitchen, and the only kind of consistent hand that we got through that era, the Brand New Day era, was Slott. And so Slott was kind of my first choice. I have interviewed Dan Slott. Slott's a great interview. And I wanted to enjoy Dan's stuff, because Dan's a very enthusiastic fan. He's a fan of the character. He loves the character. But sometimes I felt like him and I had differences of opinion on the character. Let's put it that way. And so after Superior, which I did enjoy, I enjoyed large parts of Superior because it was something profoundly different. But I was kind of ready for a new writer at that point. But I was really ready by the time Spencer came on. So I liked the science editor concept. That was something I did like from Slott's run. So the science editor aspect, I was like, cool. But other than that, I had some reservations about Spencer coming in, because like Spencer's literal last thing he did before Spider-Man was Captain America. And Captain America was the Nazi Cap story, and while that was happening, there was a lot of problems that people were having with it, and ultimately, it Steve wins, and it's a story, it's an era, and so I kind of had to look at Spencer being like, okay, he's got a story to tell, obviously. So that Free Comic Book Day issue, I'm like, okay, Ryan Ottley. I once described him as like the love child of Mark Bagley and Ryan Stegman. and his art style very much reminds me of that vibe. Like his Spider-Man especially reminds me of Bagley in a lot of ways from the 90s. Not saying that Bagley today is not great, because Bagley today, like, is great. Like, I loved Ultimate Spider-Man. I still have the entire Bagley run. So I loved Bagley back then. But Ryan Ottley's artwork is just so freaking dynamic and good, and it honestly makes me want to go back and pick up Invincible as a result. So Ottley was great artwork throughout. Ramos, we kind of talked about it during the recap, but Ramos was really good.
Zach, may I ask a question? When did you leave off with Invincible?
I've actually never read Invincible. It's making me want to go back and read Invincible.
Okay. Because I've read a good portion of Invincible, so I can say right now that Ottley's work is solid. It's if you like it in here, you're definitely gonna like it a lot in Invincible. His redheads tend to look the same.
I had heard that. That like she looked like MJ looked mysteriously like the redhead from Invincible. I was like, but I mean, this was Ottley's first.
Right.
He got to draw the entire Marvel universe. Like that's and I'm really glad that Spencer stuck that in. It makes me, like the story, the first two parts really whet my appetite. I'm like, okay, what is Spencer doing? Like, and so for me, I'm giving this an A+. I really enjoyed the story. I really the stuff with MJ. I talk about the meta commentary, and I know we're going to probably talk about that extensively here in a minute. But like, it felt like that it wasn't just Peter talking to MJ; it was Peter talking to the fans,
right?
The longtime fans, the fans that were kind of a little disenfranchised with everything that happened with Quesada and Brand New Day or One More Day. And I always feel bad to a certain extent for Dan Slott, because he had to follow such a controversial storyline, and it hung over the books like this scepter, because it was like, oh, we're going to get the answers, because nobody knew what fit. And, I think if Slott had a much cleaner slate, I think, but you can't always deal with the cards you've been dealt. And so, Paul, I know you're chomping at the bit, so I'm gonna let you talk.
Well, I want to say right now that I like the Slott run, I think, more than a lot of people on this panel, but I don't want to make it sound like I'm a Slott apologist, where I think that he's just this undermined, brilliant figure. That's not what I want to say either. I want to make sure very, very, very clear that I think that Dan Slott did some solid to great work at times. Not all of it is great. Not all of it's going to be. I would not hold that up against a lot of stuff that I think is great for Spider-Man. But I do think that Superior Spider-Man is a great Spider-Man story, and I will definitely debate and argue anyone on here as long as you want. Let's go. But
maybe one day as like a special episode, we might have to do. We did a great debate on Clone Saga Chronicles where we debated the Clone Saga versus Brand New Day, and granted, it wasn't kind of fair because Brand New Day's era wasn't wrapped up. But Superior had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the Clone Saga has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so I really would like to do a special episode where we just like talk about the merits, the good things of Superior and the not so good things of Superior.
But the one thing with Slott, and I think this is where I can understand where people are coming from of being just kind of done with him, is the fact that the last couple of years of Slott's run is just drag. And that's where I have the most problem with Dan Slott, is that I think that he stayed on way too long for the title. And even though I really enjoyed a lot of his stuff, and again, not everything, but a lot of it, I think that the Clone Saga, obviously the Clone Conspiracy, is very not great. I think, I mean, that was a bummer. That was a bummer. When Ben Reilly showed up, I was like, whoa, okay, when's the real Ben gonna show up? And then he didn't. I was like, oh god. So and I understand the whole Red Goblin thing. It's I'll be honest, it's a neat idea in theory, but it's just a little too much. It was just way too much at the end.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
Even he admitted, I think, that he was kind of mashing up Carnage and Green Goblin because he got to touch every single part of the Spider-Man universe. Let's face it. During his
run. Yeah. And so for me, by the time when Nick Spencer was announced with Otley, by the way, when they both were announced as the team, the main Spider-Man team going forward, I flipped out because I love Spencer's Superior, Foes of Spider-Man. He did Ant-Man, which that is such an underrated book. I know that has a lot of people do like that, but I don't think people talk about it enough that it really is a really, really fun story or, stories. And I love what he did. And you get to see where, he plays favorites and how great that is. And so, I think Ant-Man definitely is something that is just not talked about enough. So in fact, even though Superior Foes is obviously, I think, phenomenal and great, I was more stoked the fact of the announcement because of Ant-Man more than Superior Foes, even though I think because the Superior Foes is such a niche thing, whereas I feel Ant-Man was playing with the greater Marvel universe, incorporating deep cuts, which obviously Spencer loves to do in referencing himself and everything. But I think with Slott, I was ready for Slott to go off the book, because for me, again, as a Slott fan, I was ready. It was time. And so when Nick Spencer jumps on, it's a giant breath of fresh air, and
it reminds me of when and I feel like I'm filibustering a little bit, but it reminds me of when Mackie let go of Peter Parker's Spider-Man in issue 20, and Mackie was able to kind of start just writing ASM, and then he kind of limped along for almost another year. But you could tell even by the time the reboot started that there was a little exhaustion, because Mackie had been writing it for almost as long as Dan Slott had wrote Spider-Man. I mean, he'd started writing Spider-Man with Web of Spider-Man, and then jumped over to Adjectiveless, and then it became Peter Parker, and then he wrote that until the reboot. So it was just like this long, continuous run of him writing Spider-Man, and then by the time Paul Jenkins came in, it was a breath of fresh air, and it's very different type of breath of fresh air for the stories, because Jenkins was very much a one and done type of guy. But I can completely understand it.
Well, and with with Spencer's run, there's clearly an aesthetic change, not just in terms of the art style, because Ryan Ottley is a radical departure from what we consider a conventional Spider-Man artist. Whereas most artists are typically very curved and have very flexible lines.
Yeah.
Ottley is very blocky. And then I'm going to use the cover for ASM number 803 as an example. The colors are very bright and pastel-like, which if you look at the past 3 or 4 years prior, the colors had been very grim and muted.
Mm-hmm.
So this represented a fundamental shift in how we perceive the world around Peter.
Especially with Slott got to work with some great artists, including Stuart Immonen was a great artist. But you're right.
Carried it.
Yeah, I
wouldn't say that. Giuseppe, I thought I know maybe a lot of people don't like him, and I didn't think he'd be great for Darth Vader, but I gotta tell you, I love Giuseppe Camicoli personally. I thought he was an underrated artist in that.
Oh, absolutely.
Vader's phenomenal.
Vader is phenomenal,
especially Volume 4, Giuseppe Camicoli.
Yeah, like ASM. What was the Wraith arc? It was ASM 663 or 664 to 665. The one where it's Wraith and Anti-Venom.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with how the image is rendered because like the pencil lines are all muted, but like by the time you get to even volume 3, which
Right.
even then I don't think it's phenomenal, but by volume 4 he's clearly nailed down his aesthetic for
Right.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And it was a smart choice because I think Umberto Ramos went to do Extraordinary X-Men with was it Lemire? Not the point, but the point is that like Cameron Cully nailed down an aesthetic, and then when he went to go do Darth Vader for, which I think was a smart move on Marvel's part to assign him to Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Immonen was very good at carrying over that same aesthetic, but when it came time for a new writer take over, it required a breath of fresh air, not only in terms of writing, but in how you translated that message onto the page.
Yeah.
And so Otley's very geometric, blocky lines, and Laura Martin's very pastel-esque color palette does a lot to change that aesthetic.
And you know, I have to say, from someone who's read a lot of Invincible, I can tell you that Otley, the coloring of all this is completely Otley's strength, because I don't remember a lot of like muted colors in Otley's run in Invincible. And again, I haven't read the whole thing, so I don't know how, but I've read like at least like 60-70% of it. And I could tell you that when I read this book, the pictures were totally the coloring, everything was totally Invincible. And I don't know if that's the same crew from Invincible or not working on this book.
Cliff Rathburn, I think, carried over because he does a lot of work with Otley outside of ASM.
Okay, so yeah, so that makes sense. And to your point, Neil, it definitely is a dramatic departure, but it works completely. And again, Invincible is very much Spider-Man and Superman together. And it's in its own Marvel universe. And I see that in the biggest respect to the title. And Otley can draw superheroes like, you know, and they're very stylized in a very, you know, colorful way. But yeah, like you said, like I will totally agree that at least a lot of the people that he was worked with were definitely more. They weren't as bright as this is usual or what it is mainly. And so yeah, I think that this is Otley is definitely a huge get for Marvel and for Spider-Man.
I will say this: it's weird to see Iron Man with a machine gun on his wrist.
Right. So okay, all right. I'm gonna, because we're supposed to cover 4 more issues. So Adam, give your thoughts quickly. Then Brian and Billy kind of knock your thoughts out, because we're at already in an hour, and I want to try to get the rest of this episode done in an hour.
All right. Well, let's see. I thought this was just really refreshing. Like, you know, all the MJ acknowledgement, that was great. It was spoiled for me at the time, but you know, what can you do? Like, but I just thought that's like water in the desert. Like, it had been 10 years. It's like, will they, won't they?
Right.
Keep getting teases. Like, it's like, oh, she says she loves him in Spider Island, but he doesn't hear her, and like, you know, she's into him as Superior starts, but it's not him, it's Doc Ock, and
yeah, and then that all that problematic part of Superior.
Right, yeah. We're not going to get into that now, but maybe someday.
And this is so. Look, I know we're spending a lot of time. We're doing a lot of comparing and contrasting with Slott, but because this is such a line of demarcation for Spider-Man,
right?
I feel like we got to talk about it. It's the elephant in the room.
It's a fresh start. This is like truly, you know, because this is the 5th volume. And you know, we had 2 number 1s before this in like, you know, a few years, and this one I think is really something new and different. I mean, the new writer helps, Spencer. I mean, the art, Otley, he's a great artist. His art is refreshing. His art is great. I would say, like Neil was saying, you know, his art, it's not as curvy, it's more, you know, blocky and, you know, dynamic and stuff. That to me reminds me of Sal Buscema.
Yeah.
And that to me, if Spencer has said that he really likes DeMatteis, I think. So if Spencer, and and Spencer's taking a lot of building on a lot of DeMatteis stuff, it seems, as we go further. So if that's the case, then Otley is like his Buscema, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and look, we're gonna have some really pretty good fill-in artists that come through. You know, I will say this, kind of getting into stuff in the future. Like what we're doing for these first several episodes is we're going to be reviewing the Spencer run from the beginning, obviously, and we're going to be covering it by how it's collected in trade, and so we'll be, you know, doing a lot of analysis of different artists. But you know, Otley's really good. Humberto Ramos delivers, I believe, some of the best art in his career.
He's solid in this.
Throughout this entire volume, we'll have Mark Bagley way down the line, but yeah, we're gonna have Mark Bagley coming back, which is really exciting. Because
some new blood.
And some new blood. Yeah. There's some really good art. And who's the other guy? The guy that did this 2099. The guy that they got.
Pat Gleason. I'll talk about. I want to be on that one because I have words about Pat Gleason.
So I am. So Pat Gleason, you know, another great artist. Man, we keep losing Brian. Poor Brian. Man. So I want to try to get Brian back on. If we get Brian back on, we'll.
I do want to say that I like that Robbie and Aunt May's reactions are similar. Like, oh, there's something you're not telling me. And Robbie, it's like, well, he probably knows Peter's Spider-Man, maybe, and he's just kind of waiting for him to, you know, spill.
It's been the implication for a while now.
Well, okay, so that really started during the final adventure.
Sure, yeah.
Which was supposedly Peter Parker's swan song, and then they were kind of hinting that he basically knew, but he just didn't tell anybody.
I think there was stuff like way back and even I think Dan's run, and well, definitely I think in Kraven's Last Hunt, he goes to Mary Jane and is like what's up, you know? Doesn't he?
Where's Peter? Yeah. He does, and so. You know, DeMatteis kind of put that in there, and then so it's always been kind of, and obviously the Lee Romita run with, you know, the implication, and I think that Robbie Jonah was so blind to it that Jonah never saw it, and I really can't wait because I am going to be tooting my own horn when we get to the Jonah arc.
Right.
There's a story that I will tell. But about the first time Jonah found out. But welcome back, Brian. So yeah, like I say, it's really exciting. Brian, I want you and Billy really quickly before your Wi-Fi cuts out again. Give us your thoughts on these two parts.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Can you hear me?
Man. Yeah, we can hear you. It's probably just a big lag, man.
Did it cut out again? Yeah, no. Comcast in this area is having a huge issue right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Billy, your thoughts on? He's probably going to do all 5 issues real quick.
Okay. Yeah, just knock them out, and then we'll go from there.
I like how Spidey's roommate, because Boomerang's like one of Spidey's villains, and it was pretty cool to see that. And also, I really like how they are building up Kindred. And I also like how Mendelstrom up. I've seen him in the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends with the X-Men one. That one episode where he takes over the X-Mansion. And I didn't like, at first I didn't like how Peter and Spidey split it up because it kind of didn't make any sense. But then when I kept on reading more of it, I kind of liked it.
And the other one? You don't want to read it? Alrighty. So that's that. Mine is the pros. I really enjoyed the stuff. I'm going to be honest, didn't love, but I wanted him because he had some great ideas. Whether he put you execute it or not, the whole different story.
Right.
But the artwork, I think a story like this would have been better with a John Romita type. Look at the John Michael Straczynski stuff. You're dealing with Kindred, who's a mystical villain. Romita had a much more mystical flair to it. This feels kind of more like some of the, and I'm probably in the minority for this. This feels more like the superhero Michael Bay stuff.
The big bombastic type.
That was ticked me off. I'm a freelance writer. I normally do horror. So when you're dealing with a supernatural being, you kind of want to have more shadows, more tension, not so much loud, colorful. But with the story, and I'm just trying to get this out quick before, I go back to Little House on the Prairie.
You Luddite.
The separation of Peter and Spider-Man, it didn't feel like it was needed. Did the Slott stuff, and while he's bad, well, not bad, but not great, he did a lot of storylines which showed why Peter Spider-Man. Spider Island, absolute spider powers, it was Peter's heart, Peter's character that made him the hero. Even so with Superior Spider-Man, and to a lesser extent, the 616 Spider-Man and Spider-Verse. So this kind of felt just kind of redundant. Like, oh, who is Spider-Man without the responsibility? So I kind of got, I don't know. I wasn't really in love with that. I don't know if I'm lagging again or froze or...
You're good. What's your overall grade there, Brian?
I'm going to go with a B-.
Okay. All right. So
That's
we're
not
gonna.
bad. That's not bad.
So Brian, we'll keep you on as long as Comcast will let you. So we're gonna. Okay, Neil, let's do
I'll
the
send
rundown.
smoke signals. Do you guys do area pigeon?
All right,
We don't, but let's knock out issue 2. We'll kind of go around the horn. Brian, I'll because I don't know how long your internet's going to last.
All right, so let's bullet point this really fast. So after a supposedly non-relevant page of Africa and an elephant getting anti-hero, Peter is fighting Man Mountain Marco and the ultimate version of the Ringer. Editorial review on that. He wins, gives them some books, and then it cuts, I guess, in the past to Peter and MJ after shenanigans. They're contemplating the status quo and talking about how things always get in the way. But then, oh no, Dr. Connor's class. I was so caught up in what I was doing that I forgot. So Dr. Connors reveals that he can transform, back and forth into the lizard at will thanks to an adamantium chip that lets him, seize up the lizard until he can be turned back to normal, and basically gives Peter an offer or shows off his little science project, which is basically, science for the sake of science. Meanwhile, my favorite comedy duo in the world, Taskmaster and Black Ant, have infiltrated ESU looking for a piece of technology that many of you will recognize. I think it's from Final Adventure, isn't it? They named it in Final Adventure.
It was named in Final Adventure, but it actually is the equipment from
the radiated spider.
Yeah, it's from Amazing Fantasy 15. Yeah.
It's technology. It's the technology that radiated the spider that bit Peter. So big deep cut. So kudos, and I'm surprised that Spencer found the name. Final Adventure 2 is a very, very deep cut.
Right.
Yeah. But anyways, Taskmaster and Black Ant break in. Again, fantastic comedy on their part. And Peter gets tossed into some chemicals and causes a huge explosion. And Spider-Man leaps into action, takes out Black Ant Taskmaster with almost no trouble at all. Maybe a little, but like not enough to consider them a huge threat. But as he's webbing the two up, he helps a guy up, and it turns out that Spider-Man is helping up Peter Parker. They have split in two.
Clones already.
No, like back when the issue first came out, we were there was a ton of mystery trying to figure out what the hell actually happened. I think at one point we did say it was clones.
That's what I thought for a second. I thought he was trying to reference the Clone Saga in some way,
Yeah,
like kind of incorporating different aspects of all Spidey's life.
Yeah. So
I'm not gonna lie. The first thing that popped in my head, and I don't know if it's gonna be playing through the audio, but I have the stinger, and I'm gonna insert the stinger from the '90s show right here.
There you go.
But something I should point out for this issue specifically is it's funny. Like this is like after the very serious nature of the first issue, where Peter's having an existential crisis essentially. Yeah. This issue is focused more on comedy. Like Taskmaster and Black Ant steal the show. There's one line that stuck out to me, and I guess because it hit kind of close to home because I was in my sophomore year of college at the time, or coming into my sophomore year, where Taskmaster and Black Ant are breaking in, and Taskmaster's like, tests are over, pencils down, and Black Ant goes, "You failed, by the way. Your parents are disappointed. You wish you could be like your cousin who went to Brown."
All right.
Like the joke didn't go on too. Like it was just enough over explanation to make it funny, but not enough to make it like go for too long. I did like Peter and MJ, kind of catching up on the status quo, kind of laying down the foundation for what's to come. They didn't go on too long, but just enough to, give us exactly what we needed in terms of exposition and enough subtext. Like you can see Peter going like, "Oh, if things keep getting away, like the Spider-Man closet, the costume is just hanging up."
I have to say, like, there's a phrase that we tend to use here on the network called the floating heads of guilt. Yes. That panel with MJ where it was like the various MJs.
Yeah.
It's a great panel because it's like
great recreations by Otley.
Yeah, great. Yeah, he did a really great job. I'm like, okay, I'm good. That's that. Sometimes I got accused of using a phrase called continuity porn with Dan Slott.
That's more of a Mark Waid kind of thing, to be honest.
Well, with this, it felt like, okay, these are deep cuts. They're subtle, but they're not.
They're effective.
It's not. Did you know that? Marla Jameson made Spider Slayers.
Right. It's all like visual cues and like little hints of dialogue. Like in the Free Comic Book Day issue, like he references the skylight, the old skylight apartment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how I also, by the way, I also love that he's like, "Oh, I get the skylight." He's like, "No, you're not. I'm gonna get the skylight. You're gonna get."
I need it for my Instagram.
I need it for my Instagram. God, Speaking of which, if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can go to instagram.com/Spideydude Network.
That's a plug.
I'm a shameless plugger.
Shameless.
I did like how they explained the lizard away. Like he can teach as the lizard, but also be Dr. Con. I thought the chip was a very good, and it becomes like a Chekhov. It's a very well laid down Chekhov's gun for later in the first year of Spencer's run. I thought that was it worked within both this arc specifically, or this issue itself, but it also becomes very relevant later on. And once we get to, the Hunted arc, we'll discuss that more. But I thought that was a very effective plot device to lay down. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot to say. It was just a very good follow-up, because that was part of the worry for me, was that it was just going to, like, have that really good first issue and then just tank immediately after. But I am very glad that it kept a very consistent quality and followed it up. And real quick,
so I'm giving some visual cues while I am sharing my screen.
Issue 3, sir, not issue 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well,
two things. I'm going to show off my merch, but also I didn't get to show it off earlier, but I have
big flex there. Big flex there, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's time to flex, baby. So when I was at Comic Palooza, I ran into Ryan Otley, and I didn't have a copy of the Free Comic Book Day issue at the time because it ran out of stock at my LCS. And he had the foresight to bring a bunch of copies, and he gave me one and signed it, which I thought was. And Ryan Otley, he's a genuinely great guy. I can see why, like, even like artistic talent aside, he's a very personable guy. Like, he's the kind of guy you would imagine like as a Peter Parker kind of dude. He's just very approachable. It didn't feel awkward talking to him, which I very much appreciated.
Yeah, so
That's good.
yeah, like I say, I also enjoyed this issue. I kind of thought, oh my God, clones. But you know, because I was I was working on the crawl space at the time, and I was like, oh man, like somebody's gonna groan. I already know, and it was like, all right, let's see where this goes. And you know, I know Brian kind of commented on the meta commentary, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I was like, all right, this is intriguing. This is. It feels like bam, we're like getting. It's almost like Emerald Lagasse. Emerald Lagasse, where it's like bam, you want some Blizzard, bam, you want Peter Parker and Spider-Man being separated, bam. It's like, all right, it's very big, bombastic, and epic in the right ways. And I know that I wished Brian's Comcast connection was actually working, because I disagree with the fact that it you know, I liked, okay,
It's wacky science adventure.
right,
Which is kind of what Spider-Man is.
yeah,
and it tonally fits Spencer's run, which when he first advertised the run, like when he was first announced and he was doing all those lead-in interviews, he was saying, you know, this is going to be a comedy book, and I guess that tone has kind of changed as the year went on. But like that first arc definitely felt like it could have been like a superhero version of Seinfeld, where it focused foremost on the comedy and the wacky situations that come out of this type of lifestyle.
and I think that the balance in the Force, so to speak. There you go, Paul. Where you got the comedy side, but you also have the seriousness of Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a subtext to it. There's a subtext to the comedy.
And you know, without having a true satellite title, a true title that is, you know, a like it was in the 80s with Spectacular, was kind of the grimdark, and then, you know, the travel book was Web, and then Amazing was where everything else happened, where, you know, was like the lead dog, so to speak.
Yeah.
We don't have that anymore, so
We just have Amazing.
We just have Amazing, which is great, but also like not so great. Like it's the monkey's paw. You get more Amazing Spider-Man, but you don't. But you have shifts in tone a lot. So
in fairness, we did have Spec at the time, and then Friendly Neighborhood after Spider-Geddon.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll say this: a lot of the satellite titles during the Brand New Day era, when they actually had them, I didn't enjoy them all that much. But since Spencer's been on, it's like okay, like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I didn't like that initial arc, but like there's parts of that run that
the Jonah issue is phenomenal. I will say that the, you know, Chip Zdarsky, is that his name? I mispronounce everyone's names. He's hit and miss for me. There's times where I'm like, and there's times where like that Jonah issue, I thought he just nailed. And I was not expecting it either. I remember reading that issue. I read it. I'm like, wow, I love this. And
yeah,
but yeah, like I'm with you, Zach. The Zdarsky arc initially was just kind of weird. The whole Human Torch, and yeah, it was with Kingpin and who was the Tinker? Was it Tinker or
the Tinkerer, and then like the meta? I told everybody the
Teresa
meta
Parker.
arc.
Yeah,
Teresa Parker. Like the meta arc with Teresa Parker and all that stuff was not very good, but like there was parts of it, like the Jonah issue and the Jonah stuff, and then like the Amazing Fantasy arc.
And then his final issue, I think, was maybe one of the best issues of Spider-Man of all time. I know that's a very high bar to place.
It's good. It's good.
It was the most Paul Jenkins. It was the most Paul Jenkins like Spider-Man issue we've had since Paul Jenkins.
Let's say of the decade and be more.
Yeah,
realistic.
I love that issue too, Neil. But I think I take the Jonah issue over that. I think that Jonah issue is. Because you think about it, you have two characters that, well, Civil War 2 aside, you're going to have basically these two characters actually, you know, come together and hash it out mano a mano, and Peter doing something that I think, again, going back to power and responsibility, he's doing the responsible thing. He's finally going to Jonah and revealing to him Like, this is who I am. Let's hash this out. And I love that Chip took that aspect of Spider-Man and had actual character development in this grand soap opera, and actually it stuck the landing on something that probably could have been easily destroyed and just rewritten or whatever really easily. And now it's still integrated in the 616 universe, and I don't think it's ever going to change and shouldn't change. I love this aspect of Jonah. And so anyway, yeah, I agree with you. The last issue was solid, but I just think that, like, for longevity's sake of the character, I think that issue with Jonah and Spider-Man, it will just kind of, unless they retcon everything and everything blows up, then my point's out the window.
Well, I'd like to think of Spec 310, which that was Zdarsky's final issue, right? Spec 310.
I think so. I'm not sure.
I think it's what ASM 801 should have been. Like, you know how it's supposed to be, like, what Spider-Man means to people.
Right.
Not necessarily like a development of the plot, but more like a what's that one issue? Like, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow? Or what, am I thinking of a different one? But the one of, like, gold, like the end of Golden Age Superman.
Yeah,
like
that's Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, yeah.
Yeah, so you think of that more in, like, what Spider-Man means to people both out of universe and in universe, and how he makes an impact. My Dinner with Jonah is fundamentally a different type of story because it focuses specifically on two different, on less Peter's overall impact, while Spec 310 focuses on his impact to the community, which I guess serves as a neat little transition to Friendly Neighborhood, if you think about it in that kind of sense.
Totally.
Unless you count the Spider-Geddon tie-ins, which we don't talk about those.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about those. Those are not necessarily. No, and I know you're. They're definitely fundamentally different ideas and concepts, totally. And I just think for the impact of the character, to me, I think the fact that he was able to stick that landing, because I'm not saying that those kind of stories, like the community and what Spider-Man means and the greater meaning of what the character means to, in a meta sense, in so to speak, to people, is not a great. Those aren't good stories, or they can't be well written, or aren't well written. These aren't well written. Just the fact, to me, the juggling of expectations of a confrontation that, like, you could have with Jonah and Spider-Man, with so many years behind them, is, to me, is the fact he stuck the landing. And again, I haven't researched this that much, but I haven't seen a lot of people, like, just, like, throw things out the window saying that this is garbage, blah blah blah. Maybe other places, I don't know.
Civil War 2.
Was that?
Civil War 2.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, Civil War 2 is an example of how. But see, I like Civil War 2. I love it when he faints and he goes backwards. I think that was funny. But I mean, at the same time, I think the way they've handled it here is way more what I expected Jonah to act like. And I don't know. But I'm with you. It is interesting that how both Slott and Zdarsky write an issue. Their last issues are kind of the same thing. Like, oh, what's this writing?
They're the same basic foundation, but how they approach it is completely different.
I like both issues, though. I like both issues. I think they're both.
I think ASM 801 had the side problem of being, like, Slott had like 5 different swan songs at this point. Like, Clone Conspiracy was supposed to be his swan song. The Red Goblin was supposed to be his swan song, and by the end, ASM 801 felt somewhat hollow in its approach. I think if you had just taken away ASM 801 and, like, maybe condensed ASM 800, the final arc, Go Down Swinging, to just to 799, and then made, like, taken Zdarsky's Spec 310 and then grafted at the end and made that the 800th issue, that would have been a much better capstone. Because by the time they reached Spec 310, like, we had a filler arc with Sandman. What was it, Spec 308, 309 with Sandman? That arc was filler trash.
That was rough. That was I just glanced through those issues. I kind of was like, okay. The art was really rough, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, it was like post X-Men, but shallow.
Oh, that's right. But
And I'll have words about him when we get to ASM 14 and 15 because that was definitely like the low point of Spencer's year one was Bichallo.
Was he the issue was Rhino in that one? Was that
Yeah, that was the one where where Spider-Man and Rhino fight against Taskmaster and Black Ant.
That's right.
Then they put him in a Pokeball and they roll him away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
not because Aunt May's and is she about to tell him? Am I getting these things mixed up? Is she telling him that she has cancer in that issue?
No, that's Friend of Neighborhood.
Right. I thought I'm getting confused. Wasn't she in like a? She was with Jonah's lawyer. That's right. Yeah.
Or Jay. And
then he was hitting on her, right?
Yeah, and then she throws him out, and then she brings in homeless guy who happens to be Ned Leeds' clone.
Right. Yeah.
Just out of total coincidence. And then I think Rhino comes in, or no, Rhino, they don't break in, but Peter's fighting a Rhino. Right. And then I think Taskmaster and I need to go back and reread it because that was a very forgettable arc for me.
That was.
But Taskmaster has a rocket launcher and he blows up the restaurant.
All right, should I go on to issue 3? My bullet points. Are we? We're waiting for Zach.
Yeah, I guess let's do a.
Y'all go ahead because it's gonna take a little bit.
So,
I'm just here facilitating. I don't know what I'm supposed to pull up.
I'm gonna take. In lieu of Zach's absence, I will coordinate the rest of the.
Yeah, that works.
So Paul,
Neil, if you want to share your screen, I will stop sharing Zach's or whatever, and you can take over. I don't
have anything to share.
Okay, well then never mind. We'll just go without.
We'll just have it the way it is. So Paul, take us through the issue.
So I'm gonna do bullet points like Neil because I like his like how he did that on that aspect. So basically, issue 3 starts off with a double date between Peter, MJ, Nora Winters, and Randy Robertson. Nora and Randy used to date. They are no longer dating.
Was it a double date? Because I don't remember. I think
that's what Peter says. He's like, we want a double date, and it's the closest thing we can get, whatever. Which, by the way, I think this was a clever way of Nick, as I'm retro reading now, that explaining of Randy is going to get a girlfriend, and Nora's introduction into the series as a prominent member of the, as even today's issue that came out literally today, I was like, oh yeah, Nora Winters, I forgot about her. So they're bowling, and you see that Peter and MJ are very madly in love, and Peter is feeling the absence of Spider-Man, as Spider-Man is no longer a part of his life, and he is just kind of feeling. You can tell Peter feels kind of different. And then talk about deep cuts, and something that one of my favorite things as a kid, I can tell you, was the Tricentennial makes his return in this issue. And if you don't remember the Tricentennial, kids or adults or whoever you are listening to this series, Tricentennial is probably the quintessential 90s ridiculousness of I love it.
It was part of Acts of Evil, right?
Yeah, Acts of Evil, and Spider-Man literally gets the cosmic Captain Universe
the Uniforce, right?
Or Uniforce is Unipower or Unifor, whatever it is.
The Unipower.
Yeah, Unipower, whatever it is. It's close enough.
Yeah.
And
no one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. Well, I care. I love that friend. I have that action figure. I freaking love that thing. So back in the 90s, Loki is the one who combined 3 Sentinels together, which is just ridiculous.
It's magic.
Yeah, I love how 3 machines can come together because of Loki, and it's just weird in retrospect when you have the Marvel MCU, and it's weird. So, and then he came back, or it came back, I should say. The Tricentennial came back, which again was then reforged by a company that Spider-Man had to then team up with Nova back in ASM, was actually penciled by Mark Bagley back in the day.
Yeah,
and I remember this is my my top of my Spider-Man collecting days. I love these issues, and I love Nova. I think Bagley's Nova is so good. I've always, and obviously he started on New Warriors, so he draws a great Nova. But yeah, we missed out on a Mark Bagley Nova series at some point in our lives. So anyway, Tricentennial comes back here, and it's kind of, I love how Nick just is like makes no bones about how ridiculous it is, and has the Peter Spider-Man attacking him, and you basically have recapping of Peter and Spider-Man talking, after, basically Spider-Man takes on the Tricentennial, and it kind of goes back and forth in time with Peter and Spider-Man talking about, there's something missing about this. There's something off. And what I love about this issue, and, as the issue goes on, and it kind of goes between different time periods of like the week or whatever, the day, that Spider-Man learns through Dr. Kirk Connors, through the experiment that separated them in the first place, that there are side effects potentially of them being these two different things being separated from the two beings or whatever the machine was that separated Spider-Man and Peter from the original Amazing Fantasy 15. Anyway, long story short, Peter realizes that he has all the responsibility, and then Spider-Man has all the power, but no responsibility. And
side note, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I love the way Otley draws the Tri-Sentinel.
Oh, it's great.
It has a very mechanical feel to which I get. It's a Sentinel, so congratulations, you found a mutant murder machine, and then have to make it look mechanical. But it's good that you got an artist who can draw multiple different textures and still make them all kind of blend together.
Yeah, straight up, this is better than Eric Larson's original rendition.
No, some people would fight you over that. I'm not gonna.
Hold on. I'm a huge Eric Larson fan. Huge. I love Eric Larson. Love him. But I actually think Otley does a really good job. I think Otley and Bagley do it's a much straight, better job. Which, by the way, if I say Tricentennial, when I was a kid, I always called it that. And I know it's Tricentennial, so I apologize in advance. You're like, what?
Don't worry.
Tricentennial? Because that's how I do it. All right, guys, chill. Just chill with it. So yeah. So anyway, the issue ends with Spider-Man getting control of the Tri-Sentinel and saying yeehaw, and as he destroys a building. And and here's the thing. I get the fact that we've already gotten the Superior Spider-Man, that we've already got this whole fundamental of what makes Spider-Man tick and what makes Spider-Man so different. I get it that it's not too far removed from all that. But
it feels fun, like a fun take on it.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
What Nick said, it's fun. It almost feels, it's kind of like carefree. Yes, yeah, it is. It's kind of like a parody, but there are, as we start
implications.
There are implications. There are consequences.
Yeah.
But like there's the scene where after like Spider-Man leaves him on the roof, Peter's just testing like it's overly committed. It's sort of like the raindrops keep falling on my head montage from Spider-Man 2, where Peter's exaggerating. I think it's like he's shoving the hot dogs in his mouth. It reminded me of that. But like he's climbing up the wall and he just falls down and he's just like lying on the ground. I felt that. I felt him lying on the ground.
I think that this what I love about this issue is the fact that you're seeing, like, I think you said it, Neil, that it's fun. Like, it's not just especially in the next issue we'll talk about. I think Adam, you have next. It just kind of, and we can go to the next issue too. I think I'm not sure what else you guys want to say about this, but I can say that this to me was what I love about what Slott has done in these 3 issues at this point, and I think in this whole 6 issues, is the fact that he's recapping, reestablishing, but he's doing it in a way where he's using what was done before without retconning completely, in a sense to where he's ignoring. And I think that is something that is so pivotal in these serialized comic books that we all love to read, is that when you can go back, reset things, and use a previous continuity in a way that's not going to compromise, contradict, and undermine what came before, but honor and uplift what came before. I think Slott is he's just kicking it, like killing it. He's just killing it. And I love
Spencer,
Spencer. Yeah, excuse me. I know a lot of people would not say Slott. I would say Slott did not kill it in that regard all the time. He was inconsistent. But dogs are barking. I can sympathize.
Sorry.
I do think that like when I was first reading this issue like back in 2018, because this run was so relatively new to me, I hadn't had time to set in yet. But there's that scene where Peter's realizing, oh no, what happens if like you take away the responsibility? Like it cuts to Spider-Man hijacking the Tri-Sentinel and taking it for. I didn't see that coming at like because they tend to like take it super seriously, but like at that point, I think Spencer was just like deliberately having as much fun as he could, but just like going off the rails and like here's Spider-Man taking the Tri-Sentinel that he hijacked for a joyride. Like at that point, it's clear that he's having a blast writing it as well as
exactly. Oh man.
But now that Zach's back, hey, let's talk about issue 4.
Yeah, let's talk about issue 4. Let's go. Let's just keep
Adam,
going.
Go.
All right, let me. I don't have a good recap, but let's see what happens here. We open up with this poor. There's a poor sap in the jungle still, but we'll get back to him.
More on him later.
We'll call him capitalist strawman.
Yeah. So then we get back to the story, and so it's like, okay, who's behind the Tri-Sentinel? Well, it's everyone's favorite Clone Saga villain, Mendel Strom, who's back.
Exactly. Welcome back, Mendel Strom.
And Zach, when was the last time we saw him?
That was
last time.
God.
Okay, so I literally did an
ASM
episode
Civil
where I
War
did
II.
a lot of odds and ends. Yes, he was in Civil War II, but before that, he was in a Paul Jenkins story, and that was. And I missed the Civil War II deal because I did everything I could not to read Civil War II because it was just,
because Mark and I talked about that, and Mendel Strom felt like kind of less of an actual threat and more of a plot device in that story, because he's the guy who I think in the first issue he's the one who summoned the giant Devastator, not Devastator.
Yeah.
And then like he's just there to turn Clash to the dark side.
Yeah, the irony of bringing back the Tri-Sentinel for this story was the very first Mark Bagley drawn Spider-Man story as regular penciler of Amazing was 351, which had the Tri-Sentinel return. So, and now it's all full circle with Bagley coming back on 850. So,
I should point out like that Spencer takes like an entire panel to show like a montage of all of Robot Master's like terrible costumes.
Yeah,
and he does that later, and this isn't spoilery, but he does it later in ASM 42.
Yeah,
where he shows like where he flashes back to Eric Larson's Sinister Six run.
Yeah,
or not the Sinister Six run, but the Revenge of the Sinister Six arc, where he has like all the Sinister Six with all their stupid like shoulder pads and machine guns.
Yeah. So like the actual phrase that he uses was like he was Norman Osborn's partner. He even created the Goblin Serum, but he and Osborn had a falling out. Imagine that, which led to his imprisonment and eventually his death. He keeps coming back though, each time with a code name and a costume that's a little more try hard than the last.
There's sort of like it's weird because like normally I would get on writers for like kind of being that throwaway and cavalier with shitting on previously established Spider-Man lore, but like it comes from an era that's kind of like an acceptable target. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So it at least makes sense, and like there's the video there's like instructional video with the lady from the Life Foundation, and like it just feels like an like I mentioned earlier in the discussion for ASM 3 or ASM 804 that this arc definitely felt like a parody of sorts of like what makes Spider-Man tick, and this sort of framing device of being in a more parody situation kind of comes full circle in here, where we have a instructional video from the Life Foundation that he found on Reddit.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that Spencer's taking the time to do some of these asides, like, oh, here's this guy, and what he's all
This
about.
guy, right?
Like, yeah, for some people who might have jumped on with this and aren't really as familiar with the history, and so it's like, okay, I'll give you a little crash course, but it's a little funny. Just
it kind of whets your appetite. It whets your appetite for something, to actually go back and be like, okay, I want to learn more about Robot Master. What's up with this guy? And it gives you enough of a little bit where you can go on the Wikipedias and find out more. So
we find out. So Robot Master is basically Mendelstrom. Robot Master is basically behind the Tri-Sentinel shenanigans, and he's like, well, Spider-Man's messed this one up, so I gotta figure out,
how to get it back.
But meanwhile, we cut to there's like an art auction in the park or something, and Looter and his goons come in, and Looter, he's a guy, he's a Ditko guy that we haven't seen in quite some time, I don't think. But
the last time we saw him was in an event. I think he was one of the Illuminati after Secret Wars.
I see. I didn't even know that, because last time I saw him in a Spider-Man story was literally that tribute to Mike Ringo.
Because I'm thinking that I'm saying that because I know Black Ant. That's where he was before he was in Spencer's Cap run. He was one of the Illuminati.
Yeah. And rereading this, can everybody tell that I really think Aunt May kind of knows?
I think there's a heavy implication at the very least. Yeah. Along with like the plot threads in Friend Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
So very good editorial synergy, I think.
Well, that brings me to this, I feel like there are a lot of Raimi references in this stuff. Just like the inhibitor chip. I know they're not really novel ideas or whatever, but there's the inhibitor chip thing. I think it's in this issue actually, 4, where she's like, happy birthday, and she gives him a check. And he's like, I can't stand this.
Right.
It's not as dramatic as in Spider-Man 2, where she forces him to take it, but it feels more like, they had their falling out in the first issue of Spencer's run, but this is them kind of reconciling rather than them continuing to divide over all their secrets.
So you may kind of pick up the recap there, Adam?
Oh yes. Looter's at this art auction in the park, and who's gonna stop him? Spider-Man with his new Tri-Sentinel, he's painted the face so it looks like a Spider-Man mask.
That was amazing.
It was brilliant.
That was so good.
And basically they destroy the art. Helping everybody.
But hey, they beat Looter, so it's all worth it.
He beat Looter, he beat Stegron, he beat Hydro Man, he beat Cyclone.
The Stegron on its own just gave me an instant A. So I am a little biased.
Sure. And meanwhile, Peter's he's watching this on the news, and he's feeling kind of sad because he says he feels powerless. He's at MA's house, and they're talking. And we learn that even though Peter's powerless, he's still trying to fight the good fight as best as he can. He's walking old guys across the street. He's putting money in the parking meters for people. He's trying to change tires even though he doesn't know how. And although unfortunately it's illegal to pay other people's parking meters in most cities, so he gets hauled off by the cops. But see, and the thing is, that's what the comedy here is. Otley and Spencer they're both doing a great job with that visually. I think the punchline there is good. I think.
Right.
Anyway, meanwhile, Spidey is he's living it up. He's getting endorsement deals. He's going on talk shows.
Real quick, I would like to point out, I know we're kind of sidetracking again, but I have the original first printing of this issue, which, if you don't know the thing, apparently one of the logos that Ryan Ottley put on Peter's, in Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer when Johnny has all the logos on his uniform. It's something similar to that. But one of them apparently is tied to a religious group from Mormonism, and Otley put that in as like a little as a little call out. But then they had to change it. But like I'm wondering how much the speculator value is for this issue because it's not in print anymore. Anyways.
So Aunt May and Peter have a little heart to heart. He's like, I'm thinking about going back to school, and she's like, I think you should. And she's like, all right, happy birthday. I don't know. I'm getting old. I don't remember. Or not, I don't remember, but she's like, anyway, take this. And he's like, I can't. And she's like, just do it. Just take it. Yeah, they just. But the idea is like, Aunt May thinks that he needs to look out for himself. He needs to start thinking about what he wants a little bit instead of what everyone else wants. And then, meanwhile, Spider-Man there's a thing called Uber. It's like Uber for superheroes. They give you rides. He's taking people. Peter confronts you through this. He's like, hey, let's talk. And he's like, no. And Peter's like, I can't do a lot anymore, but I can still use a web shooter. So he hitches a ride onto him. More comedy here because he's hanging on for dear life. And what is going on here? Peter's chewing out Spidey for destroying the city while, helping. And Spidey's like, well, that's what damage control is for.
Very, very timely comedy.
Yeah.
And Peter's like, we're doing this to help people, not really to have fun. Spidey, this Spidey guy is like, oh well, it's fun, and you have to have a little more fun. And he's like, well, it was about helping people. And then, the kicker, one of the highlights of this is, Spidey's like, well, that's not my problem. And Peter's like, well, I remember when I said that before, and it was when Uncle Ben died, and Spidey's like, who doesn't know who Uncle Ben is? And Peter's like, uh-oh, this guy is, there's got to be stopped because he's too much of a loose cannon. If he doesn't remember why he's supposed to be doing this. So then Spidey webs Peter up to the building that they're talking on, and Peter's like, well, uh-oh, I'm stuck here for an hour. And then the hour passes, and we find that the two rats, the two lab mice that have split, that they've used the science gizmo on, they both died because of a separation problem. They couldn't live on their own for a long, as time passed, they couldn't live separated. And so, and Doc Connors is like, well, we're gonna have to, we're not gonna do the human trials. It's back to the drawing board, and Peter's like, yeah, good thing, you never did the human trials, but it's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble here. And then go back to Mendelstrom. He's working on robots. He's like, well, I'm a failure. I can't do the mad scientist thing right.
I know that feeling.
I'm not that good at robotics. I'm a chemist. He should be called Goblin Master because he invented the Goblin Serum. And then we have a mysterious disembodied voice saying, don't be so hard on yourself. He specifically says he's a friend that knows what it's like to live in another man's shadow. He wants to help out Mendelstrom, kind of have this win against Spider-Man. He says, make a deal with me and I can give you everything you need. So he basically gives him an army of Tri-Sentinels.
Well, I do appreciate that he makes a master mold that makes Tri-Sentinels. Right. I thought that was a nice little, instead of just giving him more Tri-Sentinels, he gives him a master mold. That was a nice little touch.
So now that we've kind of gotten to the end of that issue, I want to kind of jump into let's do the recap of the next issue, so we can kind of give.
You want me to tackle that?
I got it. It's fine.
Okay.
So back to basics. Part 5 is Amazing Spider-Man number 8, Legacy number 806. Let me get to it on the. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again because we got the cover. All right, so here's the cover for it. It's got a broken and bruised Peter Parker. The issue opens with basically MJ and Peter kind of talking and going back and forth, and Peter's like, I thought this was what you wanted, MJ, but clearly it's not. And we then cut back to the fact that Peter Parker is a broken man with his web shooters, and I'll briefly show the opening page, the opening splash page, like boom, like this is not a Peter Parker's having a bad day.
Right.
So
that, by the way, that's a vintage Otley picture right there. Like, that's totally like I totally invincible. Like when I see that,
I agree. But I would also say it's totally like a reference to like ASM. You remember the cover for Peter Parker Spider-Man 98?
Oh yeah,
very much the same. I get the recap with Peter talking about how Peter Parker is Peter Parker and Spider-Man is Spider-Man. He thinks about calling Felicia, but that could get complicated. So then he decides that that he actually knows another thief that could help him, and so. Basically, Boomerang. He basically cons Boomerang into stealing.
It's a brilliant scene.
Into stealing the science equipment. Peter then sets it up as Peter's like or Spider-Man's just kind of hanging out with his little web hammock, and then all of a sudden there's more Sentinels. Freaking Mendelstrom starts thinking, ha ha ha! It's finally happening, ha ha ha! And then Kindred shows up because Basically, Kindred shows up and to take out Strom, and taking out Strom basically eliminates him from the board. So it's almost like he's almost eliminating the threat. So Peter and Spider-Man are running away, but Peter then shoves Spider-Man out the way. So the core of Peter Parker is shoving Spider-Man out of the way. He saves Spider-Man. So in the end, he's still a hero. And so then from now on, I am Spider-Man, who this version of Spider-Man can't not crack a joke. He's like, from this point on, I am now Peter Man. So, he's like, it was worth a try. And so grabs the science equipment. Science equipment blows up. They start to merge and fuse together. Kind of, if you look at Peter's face, though, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of hideous scarring on the side of the face. I'm kind of getting some Kane vibes. And so, nevertheless, Peter and Spider-Man are remerged back together. Spider-Bot shows back up and starts fighting the Tri-Sentinels. They go to where the source of the attack came from. So it's the old Life Foundation. Then we have Peter shows back up. He's like, Mendelstrom. He doesn't look so good, even by his standards. Considering at one point that Mendelstrom was literally ahead, he's had better days. So basically, he's like, guess my name. And all of a sudden, we start hearing the Tri-Sentinel saying, guess my name. And they all just blow up. So
I forgot about that. I thought that was legitimately creepy. Again, going back to the what's her name, the beetle puking up maggots.
Right. Yeah,
it's not maybe as disturbing but it's still kind of a creepy thing, and I totally forgot about rereading that. And that was interesting.
So
that's because we didn't. That's because with retrospect behind us, we didn't have.
Nobody knew the name. The nickname that we had given him was Scintademon.
Yeah, so this added to the mystery, and admittedly, it was weird. 24 issues later, we finally got the payoff to that. Yeah. But it's very good work on Spencer's part. He sets up the mystery, and he kind of slowly eases you in. He doesn't even give you very much detail; just kind of shows up a show of force, and that's it.
Right. And so at this point, Peter's kind of starting to go, I wonder who the killer was, and talking it over with MJ. And MJ, basically says, look, dude, all right, tonight you're mine. Probably gonna have a similar conversation with Sarah here in a little bit. In terms of you used up half the night to do this. So basically, we then cut back to Black Ant and Taskmaster, and they're basically being interviewed by Not Shield, and after some house ads, there's a big giant explosion. And we then cut back to the desert, or to the jungle. We finally reveal who's been hunting people these last several issues. It is, in fact,
your boy,
your boy, the man, the myth, the dead guy, named
multiple times,
the multiple time dead man.
He's an X-Man.
He's not. He's not. To share the screen briefly, to give you the final splash page, bam! There he is, Craven the Hunter. He's here. So we're teasing what would become the Hunted storyline. So next is kind of the setup for that. Some really great covers. If you haven't seen these are the alternate covers for ASM Volume 5, Number 1, aka Amazing Spider-Man 802.
If I may, like when we talk about this arc, and also there's a nice video game cover.
Right.
When we talk about ASM's first arc, there was kind of a lot writing on it. Not only for ASM, but I think for Marvel, kind of as a brand, because they just had the Legacy relaunch, and no one, I don't know anyone who genuinely liked the full of Legacy.
Fall of Parker.
Yeah, and when you look at that, you see Fresh Start, and Fresh Start, while it had its clunker titles, like I think Ta-Nehisi Coates' Cap is kind of and then you got like Doctor Strange. That was like the worst of it, and even then that wasn't like horrible, but like there was a lot writing on ASM because it was basically like you take your dark horse writer at that point, because Nick Spencer had a lot riding on his shoulders because he just came off of arguably, I wouldn't say the most, but one of the most infamous events Marvel's ever published. I
would say infamous event because it was like regarded as this all the controversy with Cap's a Nazi and all those bull crap.
Without remembering the status quo goes back to normal.
Yeah, I know.
Years.
Well, it's one of those things where people are like, "Oh, Cap's a Nazi," and look,
people didn't think about it.
When I talked about this earlier in the show, it was a story, and people didn't view it as a story because so often we look at the ongoing narrative of Captain America, ongoing narrative of Spider-Man, ongoing narrative of Iron Man, and viewing it as a story from a beginning, a middle, to end, you can start really taking that analysis, and it may not be. I'll say this: it may end up being regarded as a much better story once the full story comes out, but the controversy was so great. You're right, Neil. There was a lot writing because at this point,
Spencer was like their dark horse.
Well, yes, but but we also haven't really talked about this. But Alonso just got fired at this point.
Yeah,
you just brought
Cebulski was in.
Yeah, Cebulski was in.
Yeah.
So Cebulski's barely getting a chance to start. I think he'd been on the job for maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 months. Right around the time that Cebulski comes in, he makes the decision that, okay, Slott's going to wrap up his run with 802. Slott kind of had that, I think, in his mind's eye, kind of where it was at. Okay, he wraps it up with 801. I was really kind of annoyed, truth be told. As much as I enjoyed that last issue of Slott's run, because it was actually a pretty decent issue, but the problem is that now a lot of people are looking at the Zdarsky last issue of Friendly Neighborhood.
We talked about that while you were gone.
We talked about that.
And so you're looking at that particular issue. Sorry, folks, I had to go take care of something.
You're good,
but that's last issue of Zdarsky's run was so good that like Slott's kind of comes out and it kind of ends on a down note, like a whimper a little bit. And whereas 800 had problems, but it was actually like pretty would have been a really good issue to end on. And then we had this coda with 801.
Sure.
But I really
sounds
think
so familiar.
Yeah.
We literally said the same things with Neil and Adam and I.
Okay, well that's great. See, I
thought it was funny. It's just funny. Yeah. It's
so for this,
He's catching up.
this arc was so important, and I wasn't intending. I was really hoping this episode would be only like an hour and a half, but we blew by that. But I felt like there was a lot we had to establish with this episode, so it was kind of one of those catch-22 things. This arc really, really sold me on Spencer. I was like, okay, the problems that I had with Peter Parker, not necessarily the problems with Spider-Man, and the commentary of being so hyper-focused on Spider-Man. Whenever Brand New Day came out, or when Omit came out, I did a big giant editorial where I kind of did like an analysis. Like JMS's run was so hyper focused on three characters: MJ, Peter, and Aunt May, that everything else got shut out. Then the reaction to that seemed to be, we're going to focus so much on Peter Parker's world that we're going to focus and build up the supporting cast. And so you had all this new supporting cast, Extra Bennett, Jonah went through a lot of changes during this time. Peter Parker went through some significant changes himself, but it was like there was a lot of focus on the supporting cast. And especially with volume 3 and 4, it felt like that the focus on Peter Parker kind of was waning. And the focus a lot was on Spider-Man. It was less on Peter Parker.
What was it, the Power Play arc, the one with Regent? That felt like almost a meta commentary on like how much attention Spider-Man was getting as opposed to Peter Parker and Peter Parker.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be one of those things where, and especially because in that story you bring in Iron Man and the comparisons.
By the way,
the comparisons between the comparisons between at that time between Iron Man and Peter Parker were significant, and it's like, okay, this is not this. You didn't feel like Peter Parker, so by taking this time in this arc to address Spider-Man being such a hyper focus, especially with the previous volumes, now okay, the balance is restored, and let's face it. The experiment to separate Peter Parker and Mary Jane ultimately failed.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people saw this arc and the way they're reacting and the way they're interacting, it felt legitimate. And even now, kind of retroactively, you can kind of say, okay, how long has Kindred been involved? How long has Kindred been manipulating behind the scenes, playing the mastermind? So it's one of those things.
So bad, like really fast. This could be like a 4-hour conversation, Zach. Like this.
Yeah,
is like,
I know.
Oh God, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. So I think
please.
that's why this art kind of captured what you're saying, Neil, is that it captured the fan base and said, okay, all right, we're going to start addressing some things because let's face it, we've been like Cebulski came in, and I feel like he kind of looked at the Marvel Universe and said, okay, there's certain things that we haven't been addressing. We've been ignoring the Fantastic Four. The Avengers,
and they still are ignoring the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, kind of.
Not as much because they've got like half an event to themselves.
Well,
but your point is valid. That like
the X-Men are kind of wavering off. They're not doing it. They're not their cash cow that we know it has been in the past.
Because he's coming off of the big Inhumans push. So now it's on him to take away from Alonso's big Inhumans push and put the X-Men back on the map. And so and like the Hulk at this point was like a C-list property outside of the movies.
Right, exactly. So you look at what Cebulski's done. He's reinvigorated the Hulk. I'll say this: if anybody was going to write Fantastic Four, I kind of would have been. I was like, all right, Slott's a fit. You know what I mean?
I would have taken Robbie Thompson, but I mean, Slott's kind of one of those. Yeah.
Right. Iron Man looks like it's finally going to get kind of its footing back.
Cannot wait for that guy's new run.
Cantwell and Kafu are like a dream team in heaven.
Doom is so good.
Doom actually starts acting like Doom again. So this is a really good time to be a Marvel Comics fan, and I think Cebulski coming in with a fresh set of eyes. No offense to Axel Alonso, but Axel was part of Quesada's old guard, and it kind of felt like it was just Quesada Jameis Part 3. You know, you had Jameis Quesada,
then
Quesada by himself,
and then
Alonso, and it was like, okay, something needed to change, and I feel like right now we're in an era with a good chunk of Marvel right now that it's like, okay, the publishing is people are into it. You know, the X-Men, the fact that Fantastic Four is being published is a testament to, okay, you know, this was, let's face it, it was a property that had been diminished because of the movies, and you know, a lot of people are really upset about the Fox, you know, acquisition and all this stuff. I understand it. Trust me, I do. But for him, as a Marvel fan, it was so needed, because now Perlmutter, his influence is almost gone. It feels like
it is gone.
And also something else to note is that, like, aside from just revamping the characters already at disposal, Cebulski was important as an editor-in-chief because he has experience in, like, forming connections with other groups. So, like, recently they brought back Death's Head, who is relatively unheard of. I think he was under IDW for a while. Like, he brought back Conan, which is a huge deal. They've got an Ultraman series coming up, but now they've got Warhammer. Warhammer is a huge market. Not necessarily in like an audience size, but like in how much money they'll throw at a product.
It's got a niche audience, right? But that niche audience can throw a lot of money. Yeah, exactly. They'll put Warhammer on it. It's on there. I didn't know. I don't think Death's Head it's still owned by Marvel, if I'm not mistaken.
Like
maybe IDW.
They just haven't done anything.
Yeah. And I read that series. That was a lot of fun. They introduced a young a young hip Death's Head, which he wasn't bad. I wasn't bad. You hit on something, Zach, that I actually tweeted out a while ago about how Marvel is killing it, and I almost forgot when I was listing all these different things of different titles like Immortal Hulk, Amazing Spider-Man. I forgot about Thor. I'm not reading Venom, and I eventually will, and I like some of the stuff they've done. But dude, Donny Cates' Thor is phenomenal. And
Venom. Okay. I am a guy that has a love-hate relationship with Venom. Venom has not been better and more consistent, in my opinion. Oh, yeah. I love the Flash. I mean, that was, again, Slott had some really great ideas. The Remender run was good.
Yeah, it was solid. Yeah,
it was a solid run. But Eddie Brock is Venom. This is the best Eddie Brock story that we've ever seen, and since his first 2 appearances, and so. I really, really am. Again, it's a nice time to be a Spider-Man fan. It's a nice time to be a Marvel fan.
It is.
Okay, so let's go around the horn right quick. Let's give some grades, because I'm going to write these down because
for posterity's sake.
Well, no, not just for posterity's sake, but I'm going to keep track because I want to see how our grades, if our grades change, if our grades evolve. Or so we got Adam. What was your grades on? What was your? If you want to give individual grades or one full grade, that's fine.
I think I'll just give a full one, and I'll just say it's an A.
Okay, Paul.
A for me as well.
Okay, A for Paul. I gave the first issue an A+. I give the rest of the arc just A's across the board. It was a really fun arc. It was especially really cool to reread the story from the beginning and started kind of getting, okay, you know, there's these hints maybe or as to who Kindred is.
Sure.
So Neil, what you think?
I'm gonna go by arc. I'm gonna give it a flat A. Specific issues that get an A+ are issues 1 and 2, but one of the major that's not even a big criticism. I think it just could have been 4 issues as opposed to 5.
I can see that.
Yeah,
like you've got the doubles. You got like the double-sized first issue. Yeah. Like if you cut out some of the I don't want to say fluff, because most of this stuff is somewhat essential to the story's flow, but it feels like the story itself could have been told in 4 issues.
No, I
imagine it's for the trade.
Well,
Yeah.
Truth be told, but let's face it, this was, even reading it in trade, it didn't feel like it was written for the trade.
I would agree with that too.
There's a lot of recapping. I mean, he's doing the he's reminding
issue. Yeah.
Maybe you missed this, so this is what happened. You know, there's that. Which I do kind of appreciate.
Tom DeFalco had an edict when he was editor in chief.
Yeah,
which was every issue is somebody's first.
First, exactly. He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
You know, I know that there are people that make fun of the fact that there was always like some sort of recap in the story instead of just a recap page, which was much the crux.
I fought people over it.
Yeah, I know you did. We both did. We had arguments about it, but again, he did it's not decompressed. Now, granted, there's a lot of story. There's a lot of things that are touched on in this Spencer run so far. And the Kindred story is very much a slow burn, but
right.
It's
there's
a slow
meat to every arc.
It's a slow burn that I'm kind of like, okay, it's not so painfully slow that I'm like, okay, this is a slog. There was a couple the problem with the GOG issues. To give a preview for a future episode.
Watch your tongue, sir. Watch your tongue.
I felt that the GOG issues suffered from the fact of the timing of the release.
Well, okay. So it doesn't help that it came out in the middle of a pandemic that completely shut
completely
down.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it'd been fine if it had been, like only a month or a couple of weeks. But the fact that there was such a big pregnant pause between the two stories,
or between that though,
it's not their fault. I'm looking forward to rereading it with fresher eyes,
like in a trade format, or
in a trade format, or because how we're approaching this show, at least for this first several episodes, is because this kind of gets into my final parts. I'm going to eliminate We're going to bring back something that we used to do on one of the old shows, which was recommendations, and that's not going to be this episode because we are almost an hour past. We're almost an hour past where I wanted it to end it, but as a result, I'm looking forward to the future, guys. I'm looking forward to everything. We're going to be doing things arc by arc, so we're going to cover volume 2 of this era of trades. And then once we get caught up, then we're going to be doing this once a month for when the second issue comes out. We'll start getting things together for recording. I'm really looking forward to recovering things like Hunted and re-looking at that from fresh eyes. Hope that everybody that's watched this video has enjoyed it. There was probably some technical issues, and I'm learning this software. We're using StreamYard. I'm learning it kind of on the fly. I've used it before, but I never used it from the producer's standpoint. So I'm looking forward to our next episode where we're going to be covering the next arc. So, guys, next two arcs, yeah, because there's technically 2 arcs. So. I think there's what 3-issue story and another.
The first one's 2 issues. Second arc is 3 issues.
So the next 5 issues of next 5 issues. So we'll tighten this up. This again. We had to do a lot of introductions this particular go around, but like I say, guys, thanks for hanging in. I hate that we lost Brian and Billy. Thank you. Whatever the hurricane name was.
We lost Henry Abrams and Bald Man.
Yeah.
Oh. It's not meant to be a slight. I'm just saying he bears a startling resemblance to Henry Abrams.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That let's not talk about that. We could talk about that for another hour. But no, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to have Billy's perspective. I'm really excited to have Brian on. Can't wait for you guys to see guys like Greg and Kelly. And really looking forward to our next chapter. So I hope this extra-sized episode was to your liking. If you want to follow us on our various social medias, let me. I'm going to share my screen right quick, and you're going to see yourselves for a second. But
that's fine.
All right. So we have our Facebook page, Spideydude.com, home of the Spideydude Radio Network, at Spideydude Radio Network. And then we have Spideydude Network on Instagram. Of course, you can always go to our front page, Spidey-dude.com. We have the latest episodes of Amazing Spider-Man Classics. That's going to be continuing on, those re-releases. And then, of course, we have our Twitter page, which is at Spideydude Radio. So definitely check us out on our various social medias. I try to post things all the time. And, yeah, so...
Also, you have a Discord.
I forgot to mention the Discord. If you go to our front page on Spidey-dude.com, I'll just go ahead and share the screen again right quick. Pull up our Discord, and I'll drag it right here. This is our Discord right here.
With sodas? Our Discord with sodas?
No. This is our general area. So if you join the Discord, this is where you're going to start at. We have our newest issues where you can discuss the latest issues. Each one of our shows has a Discord to it. So we got Clone Saga Chronicles, Spectacular Radio, Mayday Mondays. Any site updates, we'll have it on this particular group. One of my personal favorites is the action figures, because I love action figures. And there we go, Tyler. There's his Leopardon, Spider-Man, and then of course we have our own personal theories on who Kindred is. So if you want to be a part of that, you can always go to Spidey-dude.com as the site loads for me. And right there on the very top right-hand corner or on the sides, you can see these links. And then, of course, you have our links right here. I'll make sure that they're on the mobile version if you're looking at us on your phone. These all should also show up on the tablet version as well. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen right quick and then go from there, guys. Any just last thoughts?
Just exciting to do again, first episode into the new Spideydude experience, and I'm excited for future Spideydude episodes. And I'm ready to keep going deep diving into the Spider-Man mythos with all you guys and people who aren't here, obviously as well.
So yeah, you saw Sarah. She's also, like I mentioned, she's gonna be on the network as well. We got some really great announcements. Be sure to look at our social medias and the front page. We're also looking for reviewers and people to work on the front page. So if you want to join, there is a thread on the front page. I will put it sticky probably tomorrow, and well, it's up there by the time you see it. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time on episode 2 when we're covering the next 2 arcs of Amazing Spider-Man. And with that, we will bid you a good day or a good night, depending on when you're listening to this. So I'm going to hit end broadcast, guys, and it'll probably kick us all out. So if you got any other thoughts, you know where to post them. So, all right, guys.
If you end it, it's not gonna make us leave the studio.
Oh, is it not? Okay.
Yeah.